and this is the first edition of Palsy Porch. Today I have Kristine Hughes, the athlete leadership manager. I feel like I messed that up. I asked you before we hit record here, and I feel like I messed that up already.
No, you did fine.
Kristine, you are with the Special Olympics of North Carolina, and you have so graciously joined me on my front porch today to have a little discussion about who you are, what the Special Olympics of North Carolina is doing, and what life is like with a disability. I'm also here with my wife, Jamie. You guys know her from the channel. She'll be
Hello.
butting in at particular points and probably asking particularly personal questions because that's what she does. But we'll go ahead and start with, tell me a little bit about you, Kristine. Um, who are you? What do you do with the organization? Give me a little background so the people know who I'm talking to.
Well, I currently live in North Carolina, and I'm involved with Special Olympics out here for, I think it's been about 10, 11 years now.
Oh, yeah.
But I originally got my start in Special Olympics in Idaho in 2002. So I've been competing in Special Olympics for 18 years. I currently compete in golf. I'm a full-time employee with Special Olympics North Carolina, as was mentioned. I'm a junior college graduate from Wake Tech Community College in the Office Administration program. I'm a U.S. Navy veteran, disabled.
Thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I-
Really quick before we get too much more into it, the question that comes to my mind immediately is: you worked in the Special Olympics in one state and then now work in another. Is the Special Olympics one organization, or are those two separate autonomous bodies?
Well, I work with Special Olympics North Carolina, and I'm an athlete in Special Olympics North Carolina, but in Idaho, I was just an athlete. And Special Olympics headquarters is in Washington, D.C. So
Okay.
we have a headquarters, and then we fall under the guidance of SOI, which is Special Olympics Incorporated. So
Okay.
each state has their own program.
But you guys don't necessarily, you guys do or don't do things more or less the same way.
More or less the same way. Like our state, when it comes to the individual programs, are based by counties. When in other states, it could be by areas. So each state is different, and it's just because of the population, how many people are involved, athlete-wise.
But the rules are the same. If I'm playing golf in one state and I go to another state and play golf, the rules for the sport are the same.
Correct. We do use, like for golf, we use the US, what is it? The golfing rules.
The PGA.
PGA, thank you. We use the PGA rules with some adaptivity for the folks that really need it.
Right.
But for the most part, we fall under the guidance of SOI, and we follow what they suggest.
Absolutely. Now, are there national competitions, or is it just like state level competition?
There's state level. There is national, which is USA Games, which are just for the 50 states and our provinces. And then there's the World Games, which is international, and that's by country.
Oh, so you guys have a full, complete Olympic structure, as you say, only with modifications for a particular athlete's ability.
Correct. We fall under the, sorry, we follow under the guidance of the I forgot what they're called. The regular 5-ring Olympics.
Okay.
We are one of 3 organizations that are allowed to use the word Olympic in our title, and that is Special Olympics, Paralympics, and the 5 ring Olympics. We we're not allowed to call the athletes Olympians. That's why we call them athletes.
Okay,
It's,
okay, okay. And the difference between the Paralympics versus the Special Olympics uh, is
that's that's a good question. The Paralympics are for people with like regular disabilities and wheelchairs, missing a leg or an arm or some other physical disability. Special Olympics is for just people with intellectual disabilities. Now, they can have regular disabilities like I do. I have regular disabilities and then I have an intellectual disability.
okay. That's that's interesting you bring that up because um it sounds like to me that the Paralympics are for like paralyzed individuals or missing one or more limbs, whereas the Special Olympics is more broad. And it's interesting that that comes up because I was actually invited at a particularly young age. I guess it was late middle school where I was invited to participate in the Special Olympics, and I didn't. I said no. I said no. I said no, thank you, because honestly, at that age, people with disabilities made me uncomfortable, and I'm not
Mm,
afraid to say that I was uncomfortable being around people with disabilities, and I think a large part of that is I grew up not wanting to be associated with my disability. I
mhm.
wanted I wanted people to see me for me, and I felt like if I was involved in something like that, it was taking a level of, like, not ownership because that's really what it is. You're taking ownership of your disability by participating because 'cause you're saying, I can do this thing even with a disability," but it's being overshadowed almost by my disability. You have anything that you would say to a child who feels like that and feels like they can't, um, be both um, above their disability and still participate in the Special Olympics?
Well, that's a good question. What I would encourage them to do is to face their uncomfortability of having a disability and being around folks with disability. Because if they don't get comfortable with it and they don't accept that they have that disability, that will be a hindrance through their life. And it will make life a lot tougher. And just in general, I would have to say,
Absolutely, and obviously, to even do a channel like this for myself, I've had to at some point come to terms with the fact that I have a disability, but it did take longer than maybe it would have if I was involved in something like that. Now, do you work with children as well as adults, or are you primarily adults, or how does that break down?
we're children and adults. The youngest age I can compete in the regular Special Olympics is 8 years old, and then we have a program for young athletes, 2 to 7 years old. And these are individuals with intellectual disabilities and without that do some of the basic skills that they need to do to be able to play sports. And so it's called young athletes, and their age range is 2 to 7.
Okay, and you pretty much work the whole range.
Yes, there's no upper limit.
Okay, okay, um, that's certainly interesting. I had really when I hear Special Olympics, I always think kids, 100% of the time. I don't ever think about adult athletes, but you yourself said that you are an athlete, which means that you have a disability, and that is something that is interesting to me too. When we first started talking, you said to me, "I was born with this disability," and I'm being vague here because I don't want to spoil the I don't want to take away your punchline there, but you said I was born with this instead of I have. So that tells me that to some degree you don't let your limitations or disabilities sort of define you because it's something that you were born with, not that you're carrying with you now, just based on that word choice. So, what is it that you are dealing with or have dealt with in your life as far as disabilities are concerned?
I was born with fetal alcohol syndrome. My real mom took drugs and alcohol while she was pregnant. I was pretty much given up at birth, um,
Okay.
and bounced around from orphanage to foster care. Um, and then I was adopted at age 4. So really, my life really didn't start until I was age 4. And at the time, I didn't know that I was had fetal alcohol syndrome,
Okay.
because that did not come out in. I mean, that did not come out until 2000, but there were hints. I mean, people told me that you look like you have fetal alcohol syndrome based off of some of the characteristics of fetal alcohol syndrome, but I didn't have proof per se. Um,
Okay.
I had learning disabilities, which a lot of people do have. I struggled in school like anybody else. Um,
Now,
but I think
now
that's
those disabilities, those learning disabilities that you had, are those because I learned a little bit getting prepared for this discussion about fetal alcohol syndrome and that it's a spectrum and not just a singular diagnosis, which is a big learn for me. I had no idea that that was the case. I thought fetal alcohol syndrome was one thing, um, but those learning disabilities, are those separate from the fetal alcohol syndrome, or are those symptoms of the fetal alcohol syndrome?
they're characteristics of folks with people with intellectual disabilities.
Okay.
Because I talked to some of my fellow athletes, and they struggled in school with a certain subject or just the environment in school. Now, when I was in school to when the athletes I've talked to now are in school, it is different, but I struggled just the same when it comes to like math, um, science.
Right.
Uh, I failed typing twice.
Right. And when you were in school, did you have something along the lines of like a special education program that you were involved with?
Was called. I remember it being called the Resource Specialist Program or
Yeah.
something like that.
Right.
I did have special classes. The only two classes I was allowed to, um, the normal classes I was allowed to take were history and PE because um, I excelled in sports and I loved U.S. history.
Okay. Did you ever play any like sports in school, or were you always so affected by your disability that the now that you know it is fetal alcohol syndrome, you were so affected by it that you couldn't compete on a regular level with those student athletes?
No, my disability actually, I didn't know about it. My disability would not have stopped me. It was s- human interaction that stopped me from playing sports before I was
Okay.
9 years old because I was told women don't play sports.
That's such a it's such an interesting thing. You are I'm I'm 30. I'm 30, right, Jamie?
You're
I'm oh,
31.
I tried to sneak a year off there. My fault. My fault. I forget. But you are a bit older than both Jamie and myself, right?
I'm 48 years old.
Okay, so just 1 or 2 years older. No biggie. Um,
Well, I mean, it's from knowing that I know that there are, I experienced people in special education when I was in school, and to know the amount that we have overcome in our education system to better help those not just with physical disabilities but with intellectual and developmental disabilities as well has just been amazing, to see it to hear it from your standpoint, Kristine, and to experience it for my brother who also had issues growing up. and then also to experience it with my older child, and today's age, just to hear kind of how it started and then how it's grown to what it is now.
It
Um,
is, and a lot of that is also the work of Special Olympics
yeah,
Incorporated in creating a program called Unified Champion Schools. And each state is different to if they have the program or not. And what happens is now they are teaching folks, students without an intellectual disability, and getting them involved with folks with intellectual disabilities within the school system at a young age through high school, even into some colleges now. We have the Unified Champion Schools, and it brings them together. It's creating a more inclusive world. So yes, it is improving, um, and it will only get better as the years go by. And I kind of wish I had that when I was in school, because I was bullied, I was made fun of. I mean, it wasn't fun, but I made it through, and that's because of sports.
That's that's fantastic to hear. I it it's kind of mind blowing to me that it wasn't until what your late 20s that you found out what the actual diagnosis surrounding at least some of your problems are or was or is. I don't really know because for so long you kind of dealt without a diagnosis. Do you think your experience would have been different if you had known earlier on what the ultimate root cause was?
I'm not sure, to be honest. And the reason why I say that is I had a rough time just in general in life early on, even after I was adopted. I was abused by the adopted parents.
Ooh,
Um, so I was adopted by them at 4 and then taken out of the home by 9 years old. So I only had, what, 5 years with them?
right.
And I tell people I pretty much have been on my own since then because I came a ward of the court. I spent some time in juvenile hall because they didn't have anywhere to put me. Um, and then I was put into a group home, which wasn't a great experience, being that I was really young, but they still let me into this group home. Um, and then I was put into foster care.
And to be clear, the time you spent in juvie, had you committed a crime at that point? I mean, you were what, 9? I don't think you can be legally held for a crime at that point.
I admitted, and this may sound wrong in today's quick to judge world, but at the time I was being abused and no one was helping me, and
Mhm.
so I stole bikes and stole mail, and they didn't catch me. I had to say something, and that's when they brought me to juvenile hall. And or I'm sorry, not juvenile hall. The police brought me in and did an evaluation and found the bruises and stuff. So finally, someone saw what I was going through, and then from that on, I didn't do it again. So
Right,
I
and
know.
it's so interesting to even hear you say that because you don't sound like the kind of person who would just walk down to a mailbox and start yanking mail, and and really that's kind of an odd thing to do as a sort of rebellion. Do you think you did that as like a look at me, or were you actually trying to get something out of that mail, or trying to go pawn some bikes to make some money and kind of support yourself? Because obviously you weren't getting. It doesn't sound like you had a very stable support system overall up to that point.
No, it was. I figured, you know what? If I walk up to someone's mailbox and I take the mail, I would be seen and I get caught, and then the police would be called, or hopefully the police would be called, and I could say, "Look, I'm being abused," and so I didn't get caught.
You were too good. You were. It's
I get.
it's really disappointing that you felt like you had to resort to that. Um, just to be seen. And and I think that there's going to be somebody who views this video who has a disability, or maybe somebody who's being abused, who um feels like they're not being seen. I assume you wouldn't suggest they go steal some mail, right? What would be today, given everything you know and all the resources you know are out there, what would you tell somebody in your situation who's going through the same thing you went through? How do they get seen?
Tell your teachers. Find a policeman. Tell your doctor. Uh, do whatever you can to get yourself out of that situation. Don't continue to allow yourself to be abused. No one should have to go through it. And what I did was not right. And I accepted the responsibility and have since my record's been expunged, especially since I was a minor. Um, so please do not go out and commit a crime. It's not worth it. I can tell you that.
Right,
Um,
right. You
it just
you did it
happened to
as
work.
right. You did it as an act of desperation, not because that's how you wanted it to go. It's not like you said, "I want to be seen like this." You were desperate. You had to do something.
Correct. And it just so happened, I believe this 100% that the reason why I didn't get caught was at the time that the bruises were there, that when I told the police, I had just been spanked so hard I could not sit down for a week. And I believe that's why I wouldn't get caught, because if there were no bruises, they're not going to believe you. Um, and so the bruises were there, and that's what led me to being removed from the home.
Right. So you go through that. You go to juvie for um stealing the mail, the bikes, because they and it was more or less not because of what you did, but because they didn't have anywhere else for you to go and had a reason to put you there, if I understand
Yes.
correctly. Right.
Yeah.
So after that, you go to a group home. And how long are you in this group home?
Oh, it was a process getting the group home because I was too young for the group home, but I think it took a couple of months or more because they were concerned about my age. But they
Right,
had
right.
determined that I can't stay at juvie. Um, it would not be the best situation for me. So
Do you consider yourself, at least at that age, very easily influenced? Maybe in part because of your intellectual disabilities, maybe just because you were so young. Do you think they removed you because they were afraid you'd be influenced to do more?
I don't know. I've heard conflicting stories that they, the adoptive parents, gave up the parental rights because I was too hard. Well, I have the police report says otherwise. But um, I was gullible then, yeah, as most folks with intellectual disabilities can be sometimes.
And then add on the
Um,
fact you were only 9.
yeah,
Right. So it's a very strange thing because I see in your situation, and I don't want to make this about us at all, but I see in your situation a lot of what we have dealt with and are dealing with our oldest. And I don't know how much because you and Jamie met through a mobile game, Star Trek Fleet Command. That's the plug. But but I see a lot of similarities in what we're dealing with. So it's interesting to hear another story where you say, maybe this is just how the process goes. Maybe if nobody knows where you're supposed to end up, they want to put you in juvie, and it's it's difficult to get the support. And I can tell you, as much progress as we made, it's still very difficult to get the support that you're looking for um, in situations like that where maybe you're too young to be in a group home. Um, and I think that it's also interesting that a lot of your upbringing, and I think this happens with a lot of people who have a tumultuous upbringing, you kind of get conflicting reports based on who you ask and when you ask them. So you may never know the full story about what all happened back then and how we ended up where we are. So you go to this group home and you're there. Was it all girls? Was it mixed? What's the dynamic there like?
To be honest, I think it was all girls, but my memory is um, really bad,
Not
and that
not
is
so good.
because of, yeah, it's not so good. It's because of my disability.
Okay.
I do remember it being girls. I don't think there were guys there.
Yeah, I don't think they would mix a group home like that. Um, so going through that, did you remember it all? Any like, were you still bullied in the group home from what you can remember, or did it kind of did you kind of find some relatability between you and these girls?
I was bullied because I was younger. Um, the girls, the group home had planned a trip to Disneyland in California, and they were planning to run away in at Disneyland, and it got found out, and I we got each one of us got called in, and I had nothing to do with it, but the girls blamed it on me, so I'm the one that ended up being what I call demoted because we had levels. You come
Okay.
you you come into the group home at a level 2, um, and I got demoted to level 1 for
Which
the
means
for the
stricter supervision.
yeah, and so yeah, I was bullied because I was the younger one.
That's kind of that's kind of ridiculous that they even believed that. What were you, a 9-year-old plotting mastermind gonna orchestrate a breakout at Disneyland?
Because I was easy. I avoided confrontation. I was an easy target, as I would call it, for taking blame for others.
And do you still see some of that in yourself today that you're working to overcome, or did you kind of harden up over time because of your experiences?
I still see it from time to time where things had happened to me. Like if I was to do something, people would expect me to apologize right away. But when someone does something to me, I have to sit here and wait, and it's just like there's two different standards. A person with disabilities with me, and I'm not talking about any other athlete, but it's like there's one standard for me, and then there's another standard for someone without a intellectual disability, and that's what gets me frustrated in my own personal life. It's I'm not saying it's the same with anybody else.
Right. And to be clear, in case this is not obvious at this point, Kristine might work for the Special Olympics of North Carolina, but she's not speaking today as a representative. This is not her wearing her cape and like these views don't necessarily reflect the views of Special Olympics, so on and so forth, and yada yada. This is a personal conversation, and we are not. I'm not here to say that the Special Olympics is treating you different as an organization. This is just your experience that you had personally. We're not
Y-
calling anybody out or anything like that.
No, my just on a side note, my job treats me as any other employee with a lot of respect, um, and I love it because it it's allowed me to feel normal, as I would call it.
Right, and that's it's a really interesting thing because in some sense, it almost seems like it's never just the disability with somebody who has any type of disabilities. Those disabilities affect your home life, and then you might have issues in your home life, and obviously you had a lot with the biological mom, um, and the drug and alcohol abuse and being born addicted to both and then that kind of cascaded down into where we are right now with you in the group home. Did you remain in the group home until you were old enough to be out on your own?
No, ended up completing all 5 levels. The fifth level being that you got a key to the pantry and a key to the front door and can come and go as you please. And so they had to make a determination if they were still going to allow me to stay there um, being as young as I was, or was I going to be put into foster care? And the choice became to put me in foster care. And
Okay. And
I don't,
how old were you at this time? Roundabout?
oh, I honestly can't tell you. It's so hard to remember back that far.
But this didn't take, like, you weren't at, like, 9.5 with a key to the front door, just able to come and go. We're talking a more long-term situation than that, right?
I honestly can't answer that. I don't know.
Okay. Hey,
I mean,
that's completely fair. If
I
you
know
don't
there
know,
were
then you don't know.
guidelines I had to follow to be able to go in and out.
Right.
So
So you end up in foster care at some point after the group home says you've you've passed our test, more or less. You're stable enough to go into foster care. And did you finally find some stability when you were in foster care?
no, um, I do. About the only thing I remember that I enjoyed was when they came to talk to me at the group home. I remember showing them how I could jump over a hurdle, and the hurdle happened to be a picnic bench.
Okay.
Uh, because I wanted to do sports, but my adopted parents would not allow me to do it. And so I remember that, but I remember everything else just being a real struggle. And part of it is on me because, I didn't get the love that I needed from a real mom. You know how you're supposed to bond with your baby
Yeah.
and develop that love, and I
Right.
never got it from a dad or a mom. And so,
Well, I
yeah,
don't think that's on you. I don't think you did anything to not, because you were there for the bond, right? It just wasn't being reciproc. None of that was being
Reciprocate.
reciprocated back to you. So I don't think that that's on you. Sure, it's a thing that happened to you. It's a thing, or it didn't happen in this case. It's a neglect. But I don't think there's anything you could have done differently that would have, based on what I know. Obviously, we're kind of going high level overview of. I don't know the minutia details, and I think in some senses your memory um, disabilities in this case kind of help you out in that regard, because I don't know that knowing the minutia details really would have been helpful, because I don't think, based on what I'm hearing, that you would have been particularly pleased if you could remember every single thing that's happened over the course of your um, life. So they were proud to see you jump over this picnic table. This was the first time, or the time you can remember at least, that you actually got some kind of recognition.
I think it's because I got some recognition, and they told me I can play sports if I want to. So
Okay.
I, in most cases, I tell people I started playing softball at 9. That's what I remember. Um, so I've played softball now for 35 plus years now.
Okay.
Um, and sports are what got me through life in general, uh, because it allowed me to get away from the home life. Because even in foster care, the life wasn't that easy. Um, so it gave me a focus and allowed me to become good at something. I was good enough that I became a starter throughout my younger days playing softball. I played on a traveling team, um, played in high school, and then played in college at 40 years old, believe it or not.
Okay. That that's an it's definitely um it's definitely interesting, and I think we can kind of dovetail a little bit into that. On those sports teams, were you still seeing the bullying, or were you kind of accepted as she's on the team, so she's a member of this sports family?
I don't remember getting bullying from my team, um, but I do remember getting it from the other kids in school.
Okay, and I think that anybody with disabilities can relate to. There are just going to be some kids who bully you, and some kids who know better, and they just are. That's not in their nature. How did you deal with your bullies?
I had multiple bullies, especially in high school. And so what I did, and it was actually just a coincidence, but I ended up graduating high school in 91 in January because I had earned all the credits I needed to graduate. So they kicked me out of school.
Okay.
And so I was able to move up my boot camp date to March of 1991. And I went to boot camp. I graduated, went to my command, which was the USS Yellowstone 8041. And I had to go back for my graduation because I did not have my diploma. Um, so that was one of the requirements of me going into the Navy. So I was told that I need to wear my uniform under my cap and gown. So I did. And when during the graduation ceremony afterward, after like the party or whatever you want to call it, I opened my cap, my gown, and showed them the Navy uniform, and a lot of the people, bullies, were shocked. Let's just say that.
Right. Right. So so you got your you enlisted before you ever actually graduated. I've never served. I'm around people who have served pretty much all day, every day. We hang out in Discord pretty often, even when we're not on stream. Is it typical to enlist before you graduate like that?
I had a kind of a unique story there. I was actually 18 when I signed the paperwork, and I was still in high school because I was kept behind a year early on, like in not middle school, kindergarten, I think I was. And so I went in 1990, late 1990, I went and signed the paperwork to join the Navy. Now, honestly, I didn't expect to get in because I failed the ASVAB twice in high school when we took it. I failed the practice one he did, but I aced the English and the reading part. So the recruiter went ahead and sent me to MEMS. And this is where you take the big ASVAB test and you do the physical and stuff to get into the service. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to pass the test, and so I went, took the test, and lo and behold, I passed the ASVAB. I'm like, what?
Now, my brother had a similar situation occur to him when he was a senior in high school. He had talked to a recruiter for the Marines, and since he turned, I can't remember if he turned 18 his senior year in the middle of the school year, or yeah, I think he had turned 18 in December that year, and he was basically pre-signed up for it. They had to wait for him to actually graduate from high school before he can actually join the Marines and complete. And he actually ended up changing his mind, and he has what's called an honorable discharge by way of withdrawing
Because
before actually signing.
right, because he never
Oh,
actually
wow.
Right, but
he
he
never
does
actually
have
signed up, or he
yeah,
was
but
signed up, but he never went and served.
right, but he has an honorable discharge through the Marines for that. He told them he changed his mind and they let him go honorably. They could have easily have said, "No, you're gonna come and serve with us," but they were like, "Okay,
Right.
well, you have a right."
And
I'm
and
glad
for,
they did that.
and for everybody watching, I did put up a picture of Kristine on the screen here, just so you guys know who it is that I'm talking to. We're talking to. I did throw up a picture next to my head so I can look over this way and actually see you now. Um, we we were gonna do it on camera, but Jamie doesn't have a camera yet, so I didn't want to put I didn't want to put us two on blast and leave Jamie over there in the dark. So um, definitely wanted to throw that up so you guys have a face to relate to the voice because this story is pretty impactful up to this point. So I want you guys to know that this is not just some script I wrote. This is somebody's real life story, and it's really happening. And it happened to Kristine, and she's worked very hard to get over it. So I wanted to throw up your picture on the screen there, just so people know who I'm speaking with. So just so you know, you're now all the internet can see your face. So good
I've
time.
been on the I've been on the internet plenty of times with I'm in some videos that I did interviews with folks and stuff. So I'm I'm very well known within the Special Olympics world too.
Well,
So
and that's awesome. So you finally passed the ASVAB to your surprise and the surprise of your bullies. And would you say like you didn't um you didn't interact like you weren't the type to like snap back at your bullies or like insult back more or less. You based on what you're telling me, it sounds like you were more the type to either ignore it or go kind of make yourself smaller so you're less seen around them. Or unless I'm wrong, and you were just clapping back to those bullies all the time in high school.
no, I internalized everything, which wasn't good for me in the long run. But if I was angry that day when I went to softball or any other sport, I would just take it out on the ball because I mean, I played softball, soccer, and tennis in high school and college. So I would just take it out on the ball.
Absolutely, and that is probably relative to the advice that I could give regarding that because I'm the type. I don't know if you can tell because you've seen a few of my videos. But I'm the type to make fun of and just clown back, but
Mhm.
probably there's something more healthy about not engaging that type of not trading kind for kind in that regard. There's something a little bit more healthy about maybe not internalizing it. Sure, you shouldn't take that into yourself, and I wish you'd had somebody to talk to about it, but you didn't stoop down to their level, which honestly I would have been known to do. So is that kind of the advice that you would give somebody with a disability or anybody really who's dealing with a bully is to find somebody to talk to and then find a way to let it out that's productive, like a sport or something like that?
Yeah, I really would recommend anybody being bullied, especially in school. A lot of schools have resource officers. They have people there that you can talk to, counselors, I believe. Uh, so there's an opportunity there for you to talk and get the help you need. Don't continue to take this. It's not worth it. Bullying is such a hard subject, and it's
Yeah,
still schools are still learning how to deal with it because it's such a big environment with so many students. Um, but I see schools are starting to turn around and not just accept, oh, they're just being kids, those being boys type thing.
absolutely. And I know that we've said twice now, we've said, go talk to somebody. And I know there's somebody out there with the experience of, I did, and they didn't listen. Well, you keep talking because somebody will listen, especially today, which may or may not have been true when you were in school. But don't stop at one. If it takes you talking to 10, 20, 25 different people until somebody listens to you and takes you seriously, do it. Because it is important for you to be taken seriously. And if you're talking to somebody and you don't feel like they're taking you seriously, just cut it off and go to somebody else. Definitely don't let them make your problem feel small because for a kid or somebody in high school, this might be the biggest thing that you've dealt with up to that point. Obviously, you had a lot of traumatic experiences that were bigger than any verbal bullying or anything like that, but it was still enough for it to have its own effect on you that I'm sure to some degree you're still dealing with now.
There's some things I haven't mentioned,
Okay,
that, yeah, I'm dealing with, and one of them, and I'm willing to open up about this so that I hopefully can help other people,
absolutely.
it is that I was raped as a child by a security
Oh,
guard, um, before I went to the foster care, I believe. Um,
this was as a, by a security guard at the juvenile facility, or do you remember where this?
yes, I do. It was a security guard at a auto dealership because in addition to me stealing mail and stealing bikes, I ran away a lot. I've ran away over 100 times that I'm aware of. Um, and it was a cold night in California where I was at, and the security guard was doing his rounds like normal and offered. I didn't have a coat. I ran away without a coat, and so he offered me a place to come get warm. Uh, and typically offered the hot chocolate and cookies, and I fell for it.
How old
But
were you?
I want to say anywhere between 7 and 8, I believe.
Oh
Maybe
man.
I'm not 100. I'm sorry. I'm just not 100% sure.
Of course, and
No, no,
yeah,
yeah,
to the best of your ability, of course. Just
yeah.
like nobody would ask me to go leap over a picnic table, 'cause that's just not happening. Nobody's gonna ask you to do something that you just can't do. So so I can appreciate the fact that you have limits that don't allow you to remember exactly what that is. So uh, this happens, and you try and go to tell somebody. I hope.
I did tell someone, and police were called. And I also vaguely remember that this was possibly when the bruises were discovered, but everything is just mixed in memory wise.
Right,
So
right.
I
It's hard to sort out exactly when things take place. Uh, do you find that does not knowing the exact details of stuff like that, like exactly on a strict timeline when things happen, does it make that easier or harder to deal with? Do you wish you knew ex- exact details like that?
I do because then you can deal with it. It's with my disability and my memory, because I said this memory issue is a part of my disability. Basically, what it is when you have memories that are in short term and you have memories that are in long term, okay?
Okay,
Everything starts in short term, but
Mhm.
eventually it's going to go to long term. So what happens is it takes these, and I call them neurons for lack of a word, but these things that go between the short term and the long term memory, and they take your memory and put them into long term. But you're supposed to have a certain amount, and apparently I'm short on those neurons. And so
okay,
sometimes things will go into short term and then quickly gone. I forget. Other things will go into long term and I can't recall them. Um, so there are times where, like now, there I just can't recall the certain dates.
right, of
But
course.
from a week from now, I'll go, oh, that's right. So, but I can't deal with it if I can't remember the details. And that's the one problem I have with counseling is because I just can't deal with it because I can't remember all the details.
And speaking in that regard, Um, have you ever been with a counselor who felt like you were purposely withholding when you just literally couldn't remember?
Yes.
Because that seems to me to be a common like excuse, for lack of a better word, that a counselor would use. Well, I can't help you because you're withholding from me on purpose. There's
Yep.
there's details you're not giving me, so I can't help you because you're purposely doing it. And that really is is a hard thing in a lot of situations where your disability is less physical, because it's not as if you're missing an eye, or you're your ear is gone or something that's obvious, it's a mental issue. So nobody can see your brain. Nobody can see that brain highway between your short term and your long term memory not connecting properly. So they're more quickly willing to dismiss it as something that you're just doing, some game you're playing, some charade that you're putting on.
Yeah, they like to label, and that's what the world does. They label people, and they look at you by that label. Um, I had a traumatic event in 1993, and we'll eventually get into that.
Okay.
Um, but and then I had those labels from before, and I had to start telling people, stop looking me at the as a label. What my label says, look at me at who I am now, where I've come from. Because to be honest, I never thought I would live past 30. So I've come a long way with what
Absolutely.
I've been through.
Mhm.
A- Absolutely, you have, and that's why your word choice to me when we first started talking is really because I'm big on words. Obviously, I started the YouTube channel where mostly all I do is talk. So I, and I spend I spend my every working hour I work on the phone. So all I do is talk. I'm big on word choice. And I think whether you were conscious of it or not, when you said, I was born with fetal alcohol syndrome, not I have fetal alcohol syndrome, that speaks to me in the sense that you don't want to be defined as a sufferer of fetal alcohol syndrome. You want to be defined as Kristine Hughes, this person who's done all these things, and your resume with the Special Olympics, your Navy service. You want to be defined by your accomplishments and not by these things that make your um the way that you do things maybe a little bit different.
Yeah, I do. I'm tired of being looked at by a label. I had a counselor, I don't remember who it was, but I got the paperwork after I left the office, and they had apparently not been happy that I happened to wear shorts, t-shirt, and a light coat when there was snow on the ground. There wasn't a lot of snow, but there was snow on the ground. And I told him I'm a hot person. If it's at freeze like 32 degrees and below, yeah, I'm gonna wear pants. But if I can tolerate the cold, yeah, I'm gonna wear shorts because I get really hot really easy. And
Absolutely. I'm the same
so
way.
they were concerned about me because I was wearing shorts. And they put that in my record, and I'm like, "Oh my lord."
That's such a and it's so funny because my mom actually worked at the school when I was growing up. And that I think to this day that's the only reason she wasn't like questioned as far as like my wear because I would wear shorts even if it was 30. Now
Yeah,
now granted, I had orthotics braces on my legs covering those for most of the time. I didn't wear pants because it was too hot with the braces. Like it was just too much. So
yeah.
I understand that. And people looked at me like, do you not have any new clothes? Do you not have any pants? And even today, I can if I go to church enough times without a coat, because I don't think I own a coat. Do I have a coat in there, Jamie, that actually fits? Probably not.
Yes, you do.
Oh
You
wow,
do.
that's a
But he doesn't wear it.
yeah. But see, I didn't even know it exists. But even today, people will give me a coat because they think that I like can't afford one or whatever. But no, you're just a hot person. It doesn't. I'm not out. And what really makes me sad about that is they're probably giving me a coat thinking I need it when they could give it to somebody who actually does need it and is not as hot natured as you and I both are. Give that give that to somebody else. Go question them about whether they're wearing pants because they can't afford it or what have you. Don't I? And it's really interesting that the counselor focused in on all that because I'm sure you talked about everything that happened to you up to that point, but yet in the notes they're like really zoned in on the fact you were wearing shorts. That's
Yeah.
really it just shows you how surface level a lot of people are. Like the easy answer for a lot of people is the answer, and it's really frustrating when your situation is as complex as yours is. It's it's pretty frustrating to have to go through that.
It is, and it took a lot of work, and I think I've gotten to the point now where I don't have to say that. I get a lot of respect. People look at me who I am now and what I've done, um, and not what I've been through, and judge me based off of things that they read in reports or paperwork or what people say about me. And so I
Well,
have not so much had to say that anymore. So
right, it's just an understood, and I'll tell you from my perspective, I saw your resume, your little introduction that we kind of went through, and I kind of went, "Oh no, is my channel even big enough to be having this interview? She's kind of important. That's she's kind of a big deal. Like, are we sure we're big enough for this right now?" And I think it's really good that you are the first interview on this channel because it sort of sets the tone for how I want to move move forward and to have the opportunity to do this is really I couldn't be more grateful for you for taking the time just to sit down with me today and take your time out of your evening to do this. So I just want to I never looked at you and I wasn't focused on your sure you're on this channel because you have a disability and I want to limit my interviews as much as I can to people with disabilities, but I didn't ask you a bunch of questions about your disability. I asked you, what do you do?" and things about you as a person. And that's all anybody really wants. They want to be looked at as a person, but especially those of us with disabilities, we don't want to be looked at as the crippled kid or to use a politically incorrect term, the mentally retarded kid or the slow kid or anything like that. It's way better. It's way you get way more confidence if you end up being defined by the things that you do, not the things outside of your control. Because your disability and mine, and most disabilities are outside of the person's control. Sure, some people end up losing an arm in an accident or whatever, and you can say should they feel like they had some control over that? Probably not. You shouldn't beat yourself up over that, but ours in particular, outside of our control, something you were born with. I didn't choose it, so please don't define me as something I didn't choose. Just like you don't walk around referring to um, me as the brown-haired kid, or based on your picture, woman in a red shirt. Like you don't define people by those elements that are sort of secondary, and all we really want is to be defined by what we were able to accomplish in spite of those things.
just so that people know, on a side note, um, Special Olympics has what's called, and the word, I forgot, sorry, I
You're
forgot what
okay.
it's, this is part of my disability. Let me look it up first. Oh, spread the word to end the word. And the word that we're trying to end, and we've worked really hard here in North Carolina because it's actually a law now that medical professionals can't use the word retard
Yep.
in their diagnosis. And it's a law here in North Carolina. Not every state has it yet, and we're hoping that changes. But to any of my fellow athletes that might see this video when I share it, he's not directing that word at you or me. It was just
And to be
the
clear,
truth.
I started that statement with a politically incorrect word. I have a specific video going over ableist language, and I have been very conscious of not using that word because if you go back and watch videos before that, I did.
Okay.
It was part of my vocabulary, and I have been very conscious since I started this channel and started getting more involved with not using that word. So I'm trying to make a change. I'm not perfect. I'll be the first to tell you. I'll be the first to tell you I make mistakes. So
No,
I
um,
recognize how important it is not to use that word and other ableist words. I'm also very conscious of not saying, not defining somebody by their diagnosis and saying a person with a particular disability instead of saying a cerebral palsy person. You say a person with cerebral palsy, person first, because you are a person first. No matter what anybody else tells you, your disability is secondary to your personhood. So I just want to get that out there. Sure, if you go back and watch previous videos, you'll hear me say it. But there's a specific video that I did on this channel, and after that point, I have made a very conscious effort to remove that word from my language.
I will say when I started working for my old boss, which to my understanding she is also interested in doing an interview later. She has a stepdaughter that she sees as her own, just as much as her own biological daughter, who has extreme intellectual and developmental it's more intellectual disabilities because of things that happened to her as a child. And as a teenager and as a child, I was never taught that the word retard was a bad word. So I threw that word around a lot, not fully understanding how hurtful it was until she met her husband and experienced her stepdaughter's true difficulties.
Right.
And she helped me to learn that the word retard was very offensive to those with intellectual disabilities.
And you do, just to be clear, you do prefer intellectual disabilities as opposed to like, because there are some that get me, like differently abled. That one, that one gets me. But you do prefer like intellectual disabilities over any other descriptor.
Correct.
How do you feel
I,
about how do you feel about the what I call the overly nice descriptors, the differently abled, the one that really gets me is handy capable.
Yeah, I'm not handicapped. I'm handicapable. Or
I don't know. I don't feel personally good about that. Personally, I don't feel good about that one. How do you feel about the overly nice descriptors?
um, I would just rather be called, like you said, intellectual disability, because it identifies what it is, but it still does not make me who I am. And those words are almost, to me, people are just trying to be nice. They don't,
Yeah,
they
they're
don't want
not
to,
they don't want
they
to
don't want
offend
to,
you.
right. And they don't want to face it, what I have. And
right.
Well,
They don't care enough. To me, it seems like that they don't care enough to want to fully understand what your problem is, but they acknowledge that you not problem, but
so your
difficulty.
disability, right?
Right. Um, that they understand you have it, but they don't want to understand what you're experiencing with having that.
No, I think to Christine's point, it's just hard for them. It's
Yeah.
it's difficult to face a person with a disability head on, and somehow we've come up with this language, and I think that's where that word that we're all trying to get rid of um, originated, where they're trying to come up with a word to describe the thing, and not just say call it what it is. It's an intellectual disability, and that's it. It doesn't, and it's almost like they try to use those not overly nice descriptors or the inclusive descriptors to include you on appearances when all when all they really have to do to include you is include you. They don't have to use nice words. They just have to do it. And
Yeah.
those nice words allow them an escape from actually having to include you. Well, I called you something really nice sounding. Well, isn't that enough? Well, no. We need to be included. Um,
Yeah.
so I guess to round out that topic, no, absolutely not. I I use that word in that one context as a specifically something that I'm sure at some point in your life you were called, and I know I was called, um, as people who bully and want to take jabs and do it's a very exclusive word as opposed to inclusive. So instead of actually coming up and hitting you physically, they want to hit you with words because honestly, sometimes they might be afraid that you could take them in a fight, and then they're the person who got beat up with somebody with a disability, which never looks good on their rap sheet. Also, speaking about that, do the Special Olympics include wrestling?
No.
We we, we, we don't have wrestling. Maybe we should work on that. I don't I don't know how that
No,
works out, but
um, I will say, kind of jumping back onto the topic of using sports as an outlet. Outside of sports, there are other outlets that people can use to help deal
ab-
with
absolutely,
bullying.
absolutely,
Um, I was bullied not for having any kind of intellectual disability or anything like that. I was just bullied because I did not fit in, and my forms of outlet. My parents couldn't afford sports, and I was not very active. I that was by choice. I didn't want to be active, uh, but I loved music, and up until my 10th grade year in high school, I was part of choir. I've sung soprano and alto, high and low, and I also chose to write. I was told various different times to um, not continue my writing because it would not amount to anything, but I never stopped because it's my outlet.
yeah. So
Yeah.
there are definitely other outlets we can explore.
Yeah.
I guess to that point, to the point about the wrestling though, is there some level of liability if you guys were to include a contact sport that would be a little bit awkward?
Well, Special Olympics offers 20 Olympic style sports, and that includes soccer, basketball. Um, so we do have, and flag football. We do have some contact sports. And yes, sir, when an athlete gets a physical, they have to answer a question whether they have a certain type of condition with their disability that will make it hard to play contact sports. So I know people have asked about wrestling being in Special Olympics, but I honestly don't think it will happen. Um, I think that might be a little too much contact.
Yeah, and because that's obviously basketball is a contact sport. You can get
Football.
you can get pretty hurt, and the flag football is meant to minimize the contact. They're not out there slamming.
Right.
They're not out there headbutting and whatnot. Um, but to have a sport like wrestling that is specifically because in basketball that's a foul. You're not supposed to do that. It happens,
Right.
but it is. But but to have a sport that is specifically designed for contact like wrestling, you're probably doing a little much. And I presume you guys take measures to make sure nobody gets hurt in the process.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, yeah, you're not and and trying to make sure somebody doesn't get hurt in the course of a wrestling match would be pretty difficult. Do you guys offer like any lifting or like powerlifting?
We offer powerlifting, and we have some great athletes that
Yeah,
do that.
yeah.
Um,
I know y'all also do track and field.
yes.
Hmm.
Because my old boss's daughter runs for track.
And you're using
And
actual hurdles in the track and field, not picnic tables, right?
I don't. Do they do hurdle jumps for that?
No,
I
no,
didn't think so.
No
I
hurdles?
think it's just
no hurdles.
like a dash, 100-meter
Okay.
dash, that kind of thing. Um,
See, and I would know this if I had the guts to participate. Um,
Now I
if I had
know.
the guts to participate when I was invited to do so, and I want to come, I want to come out and say that before we continue any further. Anybody who's participating in the Special Olympics right now has more guts than I had at at that age because I wasn't I wasn't prepared to do that. So it does take a level of guts and confidence to just do it. So get out and do it. Do something that I didn't do because I won't say that I think about it often and I regret it, but certainly preparing for this interview, I regretted not having participated because I was closed minded, and you
Well,
guys who are participating are much more open to something that I wasn't, and I presume that you you in your state will see the same athletes at various events, right? You're going to see the same athletes over and over.
We Special Olympics North Carolina has 40,000 athletes.
Oh wow,
Um, so yeah, with some of the athletes, I will see over and over because I'm also involved with them, not just as an athlete, but as an athlete leadership manager, because many of them have leadership roles within Special Olympics.
mhm.
And so I see them quite regularly. And that's why when people come up to, hey, Kristine, you remember me? I'm going, no. Your face looks familiar, but no, because I meet so many.
that and it's hard to even the people you want to because it's not as if you don't want to remember, but combined with your intellectual disabilities and the memory that we've talked about a few times here, it makes it doubly difficult because remembering people you meet if you meet enough of them is hard enough as it is, even for those of us who have a neurotypical memory. Um, it's difficult regardless. So I can only imagine how names and faces work for you.
Um, I I do want to ask a question, Kristine.
No,
Um,
no, no questions. This is not a question and answer panel. We ask no. Go ahead.
what is the oldest person that you've had in Special Olympics?
The-
There's
Like,
no,
no, I
there's
meant,
no,
but like from your experience,
Currently
who is
compete.
the oldest person that you've met in Special Olympics?
Currently competing. Do you know the upper age of?
Of someone
uh,
that you've met personally, if
60, 60, if I remember correctly.
Oh.
so Zach,
What you're saying is I can still compete. I got you.
yes,
I see
yeah.
where you. I was wondering where she was going with that, but she
Well,
she got
you know,
me.
you kept referring to you kept referring it to a past
Well, because
experience with joining Special Olympics, and I'm like, well, she's an adult
I'm
and
sitting
she's still in
I'm
Special
sitting here
Olympics.
talking to a Special Olympics athlete, and I still view it as a. So I
As
guess
something for kids.
is that a typical response to somebody when you say you're a Special Olympics athlete? Do people even know that adults can participate?
They do, but they see me more as normal. Because I get judged on my appearance, not the
Okay,
fact that, again, my disability is invisible until something triggers it. Like with and I'm just using this example, Starfleet Command, the drama that's going on in there. That's when my disability comes out, where I struggle to stand up for myself, um, and basically just let people walk all over me.
right.
And you see it when I'm under stress. You don't see it when I'm not under stress. I look as normal as anybody else. And that's fine. I'm glad. But just because I don't look disabled doesn't mean I'm not disabled.
Right, which is why they always tell people always tell others, just because you see somebody perfectly able to get out of a vehicle if they have a handicapped placard, don't be quick to judge them because you don't know what their disability is. It could be an invisible
Do
disability.
do you have one of the fancy placards?
I do not know.
Is that by choice or because you could get one, right?
I have a driver's license, but I can't afford a car, and so I just choose.
R
I
r
choose to walk when I can.
and and I
Um,
respect that. I have a driver license, but I can't drive. Like, legally, I can drive, but my disability, just it's well, I could drive. I could go get in the car right now and push the pedals and
no,
stuff, but
no.
but you hear my wife in the background. No, you can't. Nuh-uh, 'cause
I've
you
I've
gonna
heard
wreck that
too
car.
many yeah, I've heard too many horror stories about every time he gets into the car, there's been an accident, and I'm like, yeah, no, that's not happening.
Yeah,
Um,
I would say 10 plus at this point, accidents probably, if I had to
and how many years that you drove,
and
actively drove?
less than 10. So
So roughly 1 year.
I understand that completely. I don't have one
Yeah.
either, but I presume that if you did and you used it, you would get looks because as people can see on the picture here, you don't look disabled on the face of it. It's not as if
Mm.
it's a thing that would be patently obvious by you walking around. Um, I wouldn't I wouldn't have assumed that if you didn't say based on the picture I see here. Um, and and I guess that assumption goes both ways. You don't assume somebody is either way neurotypical or intellectually disabled until you know. And I guess that's a big lesson we can take away from this part of the discussion of don't assume somebody's ability until you know whether they can. Now, regarding your ability as an athlete playing golf, are you um, scored differently as somebody who might be um, disabled in a different way that impedes their ability differently, or is there other ways the Special Olympics compensates for that?
No. When we do unified sports, which is basically what I do with golf right now, I play 9-hole alternate shot. My partner is someone without an intellectual disability, um, and basically she's my coach, and then she's also hitting shots. So basically, I hit, she hits, I hit, she hits, etc. But we're scored the same way, whether or not you have an intellectual disability or not.
Now,
We play the sport, we play golf the same way it's meant to be played.
you play by the rules.
Play by
N
the rules.
Now you use the word someone without an intellectual disability, and I've been using the word neurotypical because that's one of those words I learned is more acceptable than saying normal. So if there's something wrong with me saying that, please let me know because I'm learning this whole disability friendly language thing
Mhm.
as I've started to grow the channel. So I'm learning because before I would just go off the cuff and say whatever I wanted, and then I started to realize that this channel has an opportunity to be something for the community. So I don't want to use that word if it's not appropriate, but I also don't want to say normal. So you prefer with and without. Because is that person who is your alternate shot, are they without any disability at all, or they have another disability that is not intellectual?
No, they don't have a disability that I'm aware of. We have not talked about that.
Okay.
So,
So is that how it works for the entirety of golf? You have one person that does have a disability and one that doesn't? Is that how that's paired up?
um, we call them unified sports.
Okay.
And so this is bringing the public in to seeing that we are capable of playing sports and giving them the experience and the opportunity to compete with us. And her and I last year, I believe, took gold, and the year before took gold in 9-hole alternate shot. Um, and so I don't really know the PC word for someone without an intellectual disability. I think it's just easier for me to say without an intellectual disability. because I've said it so much.
Well, and I just I just wanted to be clear if we were talking about somebody who had another disability or somebody who was without disabilities at all. And listen, I don't want to turn this channel into the PC hour because I'll never
Right,
be completely PC, but I also don't want to use um language that is specifically offensive to my target audience, right? Because I want people with disabilities to be able to watch this channel and feel good about themselves. I don't I don't want to inadvertently use a word and be turning off my target audience here. That would be like another TV station just railing on who their target audience is, and that's not good for anybody. So I don't want to challenge the PC nature of saying with and without because I don't know what's right and wrong anymore, and it really depends on the person because I don't mind being called crippled or anything. I don't personally mind that, but I also wouldn't walk up to a person I just met who has a disability and say, "Hey, what's up?" and then interact with them in that way because I don't know how what they're comfortable with. Because individually, you're gonna have different comfort levels, so it's best to use as blanket a term as you can, or as neutral a term as you can, until you know how somebody feels and is comfortable. And just because somebody refers to themselves that way, if if I was walking down the street and somebody yelled that at me, I might turn around and look at them sideways because they don't know me.
right.
What right do they have to use that word to define me? So know your audience, know who you're talking to, and don't assume that somebody is comfortable being called a particular thing. Um, it's interesting though. You said because so your coach is not a Special Olympics athlete. I almost used that IAN word that we're not supposed to use. Um, the your coach is not a Special Olympics athlete, or she is. She just happens to be from the the public.
She's not a Special Olympics athlete.
Okay, but you guys have worked together for how long?
I think we've been together for 3 or 4 seasons. This
Okay,
would have been I think this would have been our 5th season had the pandemic not changed everything.
yeah. Talk about a word we can't say on YouTube. You can't say the c word, and I don't mean the one that people typically. You can't say that one either, but I mean in relation to the pandemic that's going on. Um, So you guys have had you were telling me a little bit earlier, you guys have had and I think you said this in the chat on stream. You've had no events at all this year.
Correct, except for some fundraisers. One of them being Over the Edge, which is one of our bigger events, fundraising event, state level event, sorry.
And
That
this is
um,
going on now.
no, it went back on in September, October.
Okay. Speaking about fundraisers real quick, do you have a link somewhere that you could send me that I could put in the description that folks could donate to the Special Olympics if they wanted to?
I would love it because the prize, if I'm able to raise 150 or up to 1,000, they said if I raise 1,000, uh, they might there might be a prize there too. So
Okay.
um, I'll have to get that to you.
Yeah, yeah, definitely do. I don't know when exactly this video is going to be released because I want to produce this in a way that gives it the justice it's due because I think discussions like this are super important and need to happen more. But I don't want to take any of the credit for this at all. So I do want to give people an opportunity if they want to support the channel, do that this time around by supporting the Special Olympics because and just so we're clear, you and I didn't talk about this before. It's not why you're here. You didn't come here because I was going to put a link in to donate. You didn't. I'm actually springing that on you right now. You didn't come here expecting that. So it's not like the only reason you were here was to raise some money. But if we have an opportunity to do that for you, I want to do that.
Correct. I came because I wanted to tell my story, and um,
Absolutely.
I like what you're doing. I mean, it's very impressive. I've thought about starting a YouTube channel and just talking about what I go through.
Yeah.
because we haven't gotten to the heart of the story.
Okay.
This is basically what I tell people is I lived in two worlds.
Okay.
From being born to being 2000, I lived a normal life. That's what I call it, a normal life. Even though it wasn't great, it was normal life. Then in 2000 to now, um, um, sorry, I just got a text message or
Fine.
a message. Um, I lived in the um, intellectual disability world, and I'm trying to find where I fit in, and and that's an ongoing battle with me,
Of
not
course.
anybody else, just me.
Right.
And so,
So, and to kind of tie up everything we talked about before and jump into that. So, you went through your service in the Navy, and you served as a
Lagger, Lagger. I worked on pipes and generators to make them quieter and safer aboard frigates and destroyers.
okay, okay. Um, that is, man, that sounds dangerous.
It was fun. I've been in small places. I was just a twig when I was in the Navy. I was 142 when I went into boot camp. I basically tell people when I show them that picture, um, I was a twig then, but I grew into a mighty oak now.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting though because you had an idea that you had struggles in school and maybe you were lagging behind intellectually, but you served your entire time in the Navy uh, before knowing the actual root of all this. The fetal alcohol syndrome, right? Or am I getting the timeline mixed up there?
I got a year and a half in basically. Oh, and to answer your question, it's called delayed enlistment when you sign the paperwork before you go in, but you're still in.
Ah,
You're
Ah,
okay,
just you're not doing things in uniform. Like when when I was in this delayed enlistment program, I actually went to bases in California, worked out with a recruiter, with a person. I think it was a recruiter. Um, we did all sorts of things, and it does count as time served, from what I've been told.
okay,
So I've served a year and a half, and before I was medically discharged because of my back and my knees and some other medical issues.
okay.
Um, so that
So,
was to answer that question. But what was the sorry?
I,
What was
I,
the other question?
well, first off, I want to say I like having you on. You make me wrap up things that otherwise wouldn't get wrapped up because, as I said before we started, this is not a there's no script here. I don't have any papers here to keep me on track. So I appreciate you for wrapping that wrapping that up for me. Because I had totally forgotten that's how we went down this rabbit hole to begin with. Um, the question was so you did. I think that answers the question. You did serve your time in full before you found out you were diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome.
you
Yeah,
didn't. Yeah, you didn't.
You,
You
I
didn't find
you
out until after you were
right.
out of the military.
I was in the military. I signed the paperwork in late 1990. I got out in 92, March of 92. Um, and so I didn't find out that I had an intellectual disability until 2000.
Okay.
So what was life like in that interim? So you get out of the military, you've been medically discharged. Did you did you feel bad about that in any way? Were you kind of sad to be discharged and now you got to go find your space in the civilian world?
Life got even harder then after I got out. I briefly was able to stay at the foster care program house, even though I wasn't in the foster care system anymore.
Okay.
Um, they took me in because I had nowhere to go. And then in '93, my life took a drastic turn. Um, without going into the exact details, I was
Right.
raped again.
Okay.
Um, I was drugged and raped by someone because I was homeless. I was out in the streets, and um, I defended myself, and I'm the one that got convicted, unfortunately. Um, and I live with that every day, but I felt I did what I had to do. Um,
And honestly, without knowing the details, you absolutely did. And we could have an entire discussion about how sickening that fact is that you were convicted of a crime in the process of defending yourself. That's that makes me angry, honestly, if I'm gonna be um if I'm gonna be honest about it. I'm I'm actually rather upset about that.
it's frustrating, but it's also been a learning lesson to where I can teach people um, to not look this because that's where it really got started was don't look at who I was, look at who I am now because um, I was finding it hard to find work because people didn't trust me. I had people say they were scared of me, even though there was no reason to be scared of me. But I understand their fear. Um,
And,
I was homeless even after that period. I've been
right.
homeless at least 4 to 5 times. I was either on someone's couch or actually out on the street. And so that period was tough for me. 93, I was in I was in jail for 7 months from and 6 of those 7 months in solitary confinement for my own protection.
That's an interesting thing where cuz cuz I've done some things that probably could have landed me in incarceration and maybe should have uh as far as like possession, so on and so forth, and things that you rightly don't get involved in because it's no good for you, kids. Don't do that. Bad news bears. But um, everybody had always told me that I would be segregated because I had a disability. Um, so were you segregated because of your intellectual disabilities, or like people could recognize that you weren't um, neurotypical, to use the word that I think is the PC word? Um, d
They could have that could have been the reason, but some of the girls were trying to pick fights,
okay,
and I don't fight. I and because look, the one time I did defend myself, I got in trouble.
right.
Um,
You have a bad precedent with even something where you rightly defended yourself. You have a bad experience where you can look back and go, okay, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that again.
yeah, for the longest time, I would not defend myself. I was too scared. It was like I don't want to go through that again. It was awful. The experience with the police and the lawyer, the public defender, sorry, uh, was awful. And uh,
You you seem like the type
so,
who's constantly learn from your experiences. You learned I don't want to I don't want to take mail and steal bikes anymore, and maybe you learned uh something that you shouldn't have or didn't have to learn, that you can't even defend yourself because of your running with the law. But you constantly seem like somebody who is able to internalize an experience and learn something from it, and that's really admirable, honestly. 'Cause I think there are a lot of people who kind of just float through their experiences and don't take an opportunity to glean something from it. So I'm actually impressed by the fact that you were able to say, "I don't wanna do that again," and then you didn't. You're able to follow through.
yeah, um, all I can say is my life has not been a bed of roses, as some people might think. Uh, in this day and age, I struggle with a lot of stuff.
Right.
Um, because you can hear in my voice, I've changed when I talked about that, but I think people need to know.
Right. Right.
Um,
Absolutely. And I said to you before we turned the cameras on here, I said to you that I felt like as good as those uh more broadcast interviews are, sometimes they want to focus on the the good and the success, and that's good and it's a happy interview. However, somebody who's going through those things who does or doesn't have a disability might look at that. If the Christine that they see is just your successes, then they might look at that and go, "Well, that can't be me because she hasn't gone through all the things that I've been through." Because they don't know in the 15-minute interview you're able to have in a more traditional setting, they don't know about all this. They don't get into all the hard topic stuff, and I don't want to pat myself on the back here um, too terribly, but that's kind of the point of making this less an interview and more a discussion because I wanted to paint the full picture. So you go through these periods of homelessness, you're kind of trucking along, and then you find the Special Olympics somehow. How does that kind of
um, in 2001 or 2, I forgot, a friend of mine in Idaho at the time came up to me and said, "Hey, you want to go to my basketball practice with me?" I'm like, "Sure." I had nothing else to do. Pocatello is a small town, so I mean, it was
right,
worth going. So I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll go." And I was watching, and I asked her questions. I said, "What is this?" "Oh, this is Special Olympics." And I tried for the longest time to join Special Olympics before I even came to Idaho. I tried in California, but I didn't have the paperwork to prove that I had an intellectual disability. The paperwork was so long, and I'm trying to do this on my own because I don't have anyone to help me.
right. You've kind of
Right.
done your entire life up to that point with no support.
Yeah. And so I said, I'm going to try this time. And the paperwork was simple. I mean, and there was a little bit more evidence, not necessarily of the fetal alcohol syndrome, but I have underlying mental health issues that go along with the
Right.
fetal alcohol syndrome. So it was a little easier. I got documented that I have fetal alcohol syndrome by the VA, and
So how'd they finally
and
find that out after all this time?
because we talked about it, I told her I there is, if I remember correctly, there's a test that they can give you to kind of tell. And I could be totally wrong about this because I take so many of these type of tests,
Right.
or it figures out about the fetal alcohol syndrome. And so,
Okay.
but I could be totally wrong. Because like I said, I take so many of those darn tests, I never know.
Some type of
Um,
screening, some type of something came
yeah,
up in the VA where they said, "Oh, this is your thing."
yep,
And was that kind of a aha light bulb moment, or you kind of brush it off as like, whatever? I've been living my life this long without knowing. What's the difference?
yeah. That's what I felt. Is like when I got the adoption report part of it in 2000. Um, it was like, oh, okay. Uh, um, I was a bit upset because there were some things in there that were like, oh my gosh,
Right.
because my real mom considered my biological mom, sorry, considered aborting me, giving me up for adoption, keeping me, and she went back and forth with this, and I'm just very thankful that she didn't end up aborting me. Um, and so I've lived with fetal alcohol syndrome my whole life before I knew it, and so I mean, it helped me open my eyes more. Um, sorry,
It,
it's
it
a
it gave sort of a reason to some of these things that you had already been experiencing. Now you had an okay, well, this is why, but it didn't change who you were. It didn't change. It certainly didn't make your experience any easier knowing, right?
No.
Obviously, obviously, it's a little bit difficult to even talk about. I can hear it in in your voice a bit, which I understand completely. If I had no idea up to this point that I had cerebral palsy, and then I was to find out tomorrow, it would be shocking in a lot of regards. I couldn't imagine what that's like, and I'm sure for some people it's liberating in the sense where now you know, but but for you, I think that you'd already dealt with all the symptoms, so just putting a wrapper or a label, because you say you don't really, said a couple times you don't really like labels in the first place. Putting a label on the symptoms doesn't change the symptoms at all, but it probably did make that Special Olympics paperwork a little bit easier.
It did make it a little bit easier, compared to what I looked at in California at the time.
Right.
And what was interesting, and I don't think about it a lot, and but when I was in California, I actually had an opportunity to volunteer at a Special Olympics Northern California event, and I was putting the medals around the athletes' necks for the track and field event. And
Okay.
that's before I knew that I had it. It's just
So
so I actually
it's been kind of something that you've been around at least a little bit, um, up to this point. Now, did you know that your friend had a disability?
um
The friend who invited you to the basketball game?
I did know, yes, because we were part of a activities, like a place where we go hang out during the day. We call it the activity center, and
Okay.
so
Okay. That's that is it's interesting. So, did you find it odd at all that this friend you knew had a disability was about to go play basketball?
no, I
Okay.
don't I don't I don't look at people like that. I mean, I'm the type of person that, like, I have friends that are disabled now, and I let them do what they need to do until they ask for help.
Yep. Yep.
I don't want to um, push,
impede.
yeah, impede someone's life. I mean,
Right.
I know they are very capable of it, and that's because I've learned. And somebody will ask for help if they need it. If they truly need it, they will ask for help.
And
Absolutely.
and see, that's something I've had to learn from um
Me.
uh yes, uh that when he needs help, he will ask for it, and very rarely does he ask for it, because he's an adult and he knows how to help himself.
Yeah,
So a
absolutely.
lot of people will be like, "Oh, aren't you going to help him?" And I'm like, If he needs help, he'll tell me."
Well, and the reason I ask is because if I went to my friend group and said, "Guess what I'm doing this weekend? I'm playing basketball," they would go, "What? Excuse me? You're doing huh now? How what is happening?" Maybe that's because I'm a bump on a log and don't do anything physical at all. But um, I think I think for a lot of people, it would be shocking to find out that I'm actually going to go compete in a sport. That would be wild to them in a lot of senses. So I didn't know if maybe you had the same sort of thing. Now, when you say activity center, I've been, because when I lived in San Antonio, I've been around the public transit system, which
Mhm.
I don't know about where you live, but in San Antonio, they had a specific public transit for people with disabilities. And talk about tests. I had to go prove I couldn't walk up by the bus stairs very easily, and like I couldn't walk to the bus stop very well, and so on and so forth. But I saw people get dropped off at what is wrongly called an adult daycare, but but sometimes the outside outside window would say activity center. So is that the type of place that you mean? Is it somewhere like where you spent your days and then you went home um, after that?
Yeah, it we c I don't know if it would be considered an adult daycare, but I don't like that word either.
That's such a
Um,
weird term. It's such
it
an
is.
odd it's such an o and I hear it all the time,
I
and
would say that's an offensive term.
it is
Yeah.
kinda it and and I guess I didn't think about it until you started talking about it. I would be offended if somebody thought I was going to daycare. That would
Yeah.
that would be no, it's just a place that I go to be with people like me, um, because for whatever reason, and there's 100 different reasons that people go to these places. I don't presume anybody's story because you could be there for a bunch of different reasons. So you go to this, uh, you have this experience, uh, way back when volunteering, and you go to this ball game, and then do you decide like watching them play basketball? You're like, yes, I can finally get back into sports. This is where I feel at home because you said a couple of times that you feel at home, um, and I don't think you used exactly that word, but you feel comfortable playing sports. That's where you feel that you excel and you've been able to show your ability outside of your disability. And did you say immediately? Was it like a light bulb moment? You said I've got to do this, or did you hesitate um, getting involved?
I hesitated at first because I wasn't sure I fit in. Um, because I've heard the comments before that you don't look like you're disabled. Why are you in Special Olympics? And I even get that nowadays, but I answer it politely and tell them um, w- we don't all look the same. What you're seeing are folks with an intellectual disability that have additional disabilities as well.
Right.
Um, Not every disability is prominently seen. Um, and that's because people judge a book by its cover instead of knowing what's inside the book.
Well, and I kind of uh, dislike the question. Um, why are you in Special Olympics? Because it never comes across as, hey, Christine, uh, why are you in Special Olympics? It almost always comes across as, why are you in Special Olympics? It comes across with a sort of tone that isn't out of genuine like curiosity. It's more out of like, what are you, some kind of ringer here? Like you cheated your way in or what? And and I really I really don't like that question because I get asked out in public a lot, what's wrong with you? That's
Yeah.
that's a fun one. And sometimes it's kids, and I have a tendency to say to like little kids, I'll be like, "Oh, I was in a parachuting accident, and and my kneecaps got shoved into my chest, and that's why I walk all funny." And then
Oh,
and then
He likes to
I,
make it less
I
awkward.
have coped a
yeah.
lot. I have coped a lot with jokes, and probably some offensive jokes. Because somebody out there has been in a parachuting accident, and I'm kind of inappropriate for kind of uh not coming out and saying what it is. But today, if you were to ask me, I'd tell you exactly why it was, and I've I've sort of learned the importance of just coming right out and, as you say, answering politely. But oftentimes, a kid will ask a question out of genuine curiosity, and then their parents will be like, "Oh, no, 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 you can't ask that." Like, they get awkward about it. Do you ever
Yeah.
interact with a kid who's like who can tell there's something going on, and then they're like, "Hey, what's your deal? Like, what's going on with you?" And and then you answer the question, and the parents get a little awkward?
Kirsten, my experience with that was Kirsten ran into someone up at Walmart. I never stopped her because I know children's minds are just constantly thumbing through, why is that person different than me? They want to know.
Right,
And so I knew from experience, don't hinder that want for knowledge.
right.
And so she saw this person who is literally missing half of his face.
Mhm.
I mean, he was missing an eye, missing part of his nose, missing
And
his cheek.
and then she had no hesitation to
She
Ask what
had
happened.
no hesitation to ask, and I didn't stop her from asking. And he looked over at me and he goes, "Thank you for not stopping her." And he looked over at her and he said, "I had cancer in my face and they had to remove a lot of things."
Do you ever get asked that question? Like, because yours isn't as physically obvious as mine. Do you ever get asked by a kid what's going on?
I do, yes. And I explain to the best of my ability to someone that's younger. Um,
Right.
but the turn the experience has been good both ways. So
So you've not had any parents try and stop them or anything
Like
like
trying to stop
that?
the kids from
Or be
not that
like,
I
not not that
not
you can recall.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I bet that it's a little bit different for you now because you're in an environment where you're at the Special Olympics, right? You're doing um, Special Olympics events, and you're in that environment um, where those questions are to be expected by the public, and the parents are probably more understanding, and you don't get a lot. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is still some judgment by the public at these events, but I would assume not. If you're at a Special Olympics event and you're judging people with disabilities, you're doing it wrong. I I assume.
Um, we still get questions, but the volunteers are trained very well. And a lot of our volunteers are returning volunteers. So they're very knowledgeable and they teach the newer volunteers about this. And we end up gaining, I mean, it's incredible how many people say, "Oh, I enjoyed this so much. I'm coming back." They've got a smile on their face. They've made a friend. So they figured out very quickly.
Yeah, that's so you and this is you now experiencing this now, but you hesitate because you're not sure that you're going to fit in um with the Special Olympics back in Pocatello, and that's been a common theme throughout this uh, discussion. You're not sure where you fit in, and is this the place that's going to be for me? Am I going to deal with more of the bullying? Like, is that going to be? I'm sure all these things are running through your head, but finally you decide to sign up and get started. Did you start out playing golf, or were you start out doing something else?
In Idaho, I competed in track and field. I did the 100-meter run, the 50-meter run, and the softball throw.
Okay,
Um, and I did basketball and I did softball out there.
okay,
In North Carolina, oh, well, I've done tennis, soccer, softball, bocce, flag football, basketball, volleyball. I may be forgetting one. Um,
do you have players that have done all of the different sports events?
I'm sure there are some out there, but I don't know for sure.
well, I couldn't imagine the same guy playing basketball is also into powerlifting. I I I couldn't imagine that guy. But rewind real quick. You named a list of sports there,
Yeah.
and there's one there that I'd never heard of. What is a bocce?
Bocce is basically Italian lawn bowling. You have a small ball called a pallina. Usually it's white or some sort of color. It's smaller than the bigger balls that you use. And the object is to get your ball closer to the pallina than your opponent's.
Okay, okay, yeah. That's it's like a sort of what they call that
Shuffleboard kind of thing?
No,
shuffleboard.
people are actually rolling a ball, um, and they're trying to get as close as they can to that pallina to gain points. And in Special Olympics, I believe we play till 21.
Okay,
So um, it's a fun game. It's just I'm not there yet.
And
okay,
it's
okay.
spelled BOCCE.
Correct.
You you looked that up. You cheated. You Googled.
I did. I
You didn't know that.
Googled.
That's
Um,
okay.
Well,
I cheated and looked at the Special Olympics program where you live, and I could tell you what sports you could possibly. I could tell you what
Oh,
sports they have.
oh, well, that definitely, I think that I might be obligated, at least to volunteer, maybe to compete after this interview. I think you might chastise me a little bit for not getting involved after an interview like this. So so
Well,
I think I'll take that list. I'll take that list into consideration and figure out what I could get fit for. Because right now I'm more I'm more out of shape than a poorly drawn circle. It's
well, you were also approached not too long ago about
playing wheelchair ball.
wheelchair basketball.
Yeah, I don't.
Um,
I I personally have a difficult relationship with wheelchairs. Um, and this is a personal situation. And if you use the wheelchair, more power to you because those things are difficult to navigate. I've been in a wheelchair a few times, but people ask me all the time, "Why don't you use the wheelchair?" And I have always said, "I'm going to use the abilities that I do have for as long as I have them." And I think anybody could take that and say, "I'm." It goes back to your point. If I need help in that regard, I'll take it. Um, and I think it. There's a certain level of independence that a person with a disability wants to maintain because we're not helpless people. Um,
Mm-mm.
I don't think any of your athletes would define themselves as helpless. Um, I don't and I don't know that anybody with a disability would say I'm helpless, and it's because you're not. There might be some things I can't do, like I'm not getting on a ladder, but there are things I can do that I will do. Um, so I would be curious to find out if there is a sport that I could manage with my level of ability. Um, and I guess I won't know until I try, right?
Correct.
You don't know until you attempt to do it. Um, and maybe I don't compete, maybe I volunteer, but I'll find something because this this has been pretty inspirational. But you were just involved as after this game, you get involved as an athlete only. So you're over here as an athlete. How long before you kind of transitioned into a full time role with the Special Olympics?
Well, I became a full-time employee at last July,
Okay.
when we were at a meeting in Charlotte. I got the offer to turn what I was doing part-time into full-time with benefits.
Okay.
And oh man, I was so excited. I was at the time thinking of moving to Missouri, and so I put it off. I said, no, this is what I've always wanted, a full-time job with benefits, because I have come so far. And the reason why I say that was I had a friend encourage me not to live off of my disability and
Yeah.
start to rely on myself. So even though throughout my life I was told I would not amount to anything, let alone go to college, get a degree, I chose to go to Wake Tech Community College and in the office administration program.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I eventually graduated in December of 2013 with an associate's in applied science in office administration. So about, I would say maybe a year and a half after I graduated, um, I was given an offer of coming to volunteer 1 day a week for 8 hours a day in the office. I said, yeah, sure. I have nothing better to do. Um, and I didn't, but the reason why it took so long to find work was because I didn't fit into the normal world of being an office administrator because I wasn't fast enough. But I'm
Hmm.
good, but not fast enough. The world wants fast and good, but you can't have one or the other.
And I say that all the time. You can ask my wife. Just generally speaking, I'm not in a hurry to get anywhere. I'm I'm I am not speedy. Uh, physically, I am slow, and I make no bones about it. Um, in my line of work, they want you to type really fast and do all these things, and I there's a certain level of typing speed that I just don't have, and I can imagine as an office administrator, office manager, they're wanting you to just get after it on that keyboard and file these paperwork really fast, and it's just not a pace that you could go. It's not a pace that, uh, was sustainable for you, and I can relate to that a lot, so I understand.
So I took the opportunity
Mhm.
because I thought this might be a good place for me to get something to do, plus keep up with my skills that I had just learned. So I took it, and I'm not sure how long I was there before I was offered a 1 day a week paid position doing the same thing as
Okay.
an office administrator. Um, so I took it. I was really excited, glad to be getting paid finally,
Yeah.
working, and not sure again on the time. But
Right.
on the next offer, they offered me a new position. It was called the Athlete Leadership Manager, and my responsibility would have been to oversee athletes needed for speeches, for events, um, being a liaison to the athlete council. Uh, I do multiple roles, and so this
Okay.
offer was 3 day a week part time. Um, so of course I took it, and then last July I was offered full time with benefits. So I've worked my way up. I worked hard. I got through college, even though every semester I had something going on in real life that I had to deal with while going to school. Um,
Right. And
and was
have you ever had an experience in a typical office, like in a regular, like, business setting?
no, I
Okay.
I would never make it. I wouldn't pass their tests.
And that's completely understandable. I was curious because, um, I was curious how different the setup is with the Special Olympics office. Is it more outfitted for folks with disabilities, or are most of the employees, without disabilities?
Right now, we have two athletes in the office,
Okay,
and she is our front desk person, and she loves doing it, and she
nice.
does a lot of the data entry. Um, we, I guess you could say, we're fitted for folks with disabilities to come in and volunteer or work. Um, but my coworkers treat me just like any other coworker. They don't see me as someone with a disability. Yeah, they know I'm an athlete, but they still treat me as they would any other coworker. So
This has been Kristine Hughes, the first guest on the Palsy Pop-Up Porch. It's been a wonderful discussion. I'm very glad to have had the opportunity. Kristine, give me one last plug on the donations down in the description box. Let people know uh, where their donations are going and what you're looking for as far as donations and what they're going to support.
this fundraiser is to help support virtual training. Because of this, during this time, we are not able to have in-person training, and so we still need to provide the supplies, etc., for that virtual training. And they've asked athletes to go around and see if anybody wants to sponsor an athlete. The cool thing is if I raise $150, I get a nice warm hooded sweatshirt. So winter's coming up, and I can sure use a warm sweatshirt.
Yeah,
Uh, so in the links below will be a link to my fundraising page. You'll see my bright smiling face there, and either me going over the edge or hitting a softball down below in the story. But that's who I am. Um, thank you so much for your support if you're able to donate, but I do understand that if you're not able to donate, that is fine. I appreciate the thought.
yeah, absolutely. The least you can do is leave a like on the video, comment support for Kristine, because it is this is very important for the channel, for myself. It's been a very important discussion. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope you can say that you've never done anything quite like this before, because I pride myself on being a little bit different. So hopefully you can say it was a good time, but a different time nonetheless.
It was a fun time. I really appreciate it, and I love what you're doing. Thank you so much for
Well,
having me here tonight.
be on the lookout for part two because we looked down in the description here on the recording software and said, "Oh no, we've been going for like 2 hours. We probably should cut this here, and we want to give you guys a part two. So whenever we can schedule that with our busy schedules, we'll definitely invite Kristine back on the channel because it's been an absolute pleasure having you, and
Yes.
I definitely have enjoyed getting to know you because to be honest with you, you knew my wife way better than you knew me before this all kind of took place. So hopefully you got to know me a little bit better. I know I've gotten to know you a little bit better, and hopefully by the end of this series we can call each other a friend. And if you ever want to come back on the channel again after this series, I'd be glad to have you. Thank you for watching Papa Palsy's Porch. I am Zachary D, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good one.